Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and I am joined by the author of a gorgeous work of family history with some really interesting research thrown in there, and I am very excited to talk about it. So hello, welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Hi, my name is Daniel Mamah, and I'm the author of the book, As the Rivers Merge, a story of love, war, and perseverance across continents.
Yeah, I am really interested in how often researchers come from other researchers. There is often a family connection there. And I am really curious about how, though, that may have influenced your perspective. The story does combine a lot of very intimate family storytelling, but with a lot of really interesting sources, interviews, and other things that you look at. How do you balance the bigger story with the more intimate story?
It's funny because when I first wanted to write this book, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I thought, well, I know my parents really well. I kind of know what I want to write about. I thought I knew most of the information, most of the background of my parents because I spent all my life with them. And it wasn't until I was really kind of getting into doing the research that I realized that there's so much that I don't know, that there's so many little pieces that I had to connect together, right? So I could get a little bit of information over here about something that happened to my mom, and I have a little information over here, but I don't have any of the information in between. So I had to kind of track that down. So I started to realize that there was so much information, there's so much parts of their past that I didn't know. And that was when I realized, oh my God, what did I get into? This is really a much bigger work than I anticipated. And that was why it took this long to put it together.
Turning a sort of researcher's or investigator's eye to your own story or to your family story, did that give you any new perspectives or teach you anything new about what you thought you knew? Or
I think one thing about researchers is that they are very particular about things. At least the researchers that I'm familiar with, they want to make sure that they have all their I's dotted and T's crossed, and that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing because you're so perfectionistic and you want to make sure you get everything right. So I think that that's one of the connections that I draw from researchers. That sort of is my personality. If I start a project like this, I don't want to I want to do it in the best possible way. And it bothers me when things are not really there. If it's missing some key ingredients or some key pieces. So that I would sort of make a link in that kind of way, that there's just something about a researcher's mind that really requires that sort of precision in making sure that things are completed.
Yeah, now that we've talked about that, I'd love if we could talk about the story itself a little bit. Could you tell us about your parents?
So my parents uh, came from very different backgrounds, as different as you can imagine. My dad was an African, a black uh, a man from Nigeria, and my mom was from Europe. She was European, from Central Europe, from a country called Hungary. So very, very different backgrounds, different cultures, and they lived in the latter part of the 20th century. And so they lived at a time when there was a lot of political turmoil in across the world. I mean, there still is, but there was a different sort of political turmoil. My mom was born at the end of the Second World War, and she lived through communism in Hungary and some of the challenges that came with that. She was a young little girl when they had the big Hungarian Revolution. So I think all those experiences shaped who she became as an adult. And similarly, my dad also lived through a lot of momentous times in Africa and Nigerian history. He was a teenager when Nigeria became independent from Great Britain in 1960, and that what followed after that was a series of politically turbulent events, military coups, and then there was a civil war that, of course, had a big impact in his willingness or wanting to stay in Nigeria versus leaving the country. So, and this is what really the book tries to show is there were all these experiences, all these things that happened to people, and how does that sort of shape their life and shape their thinking?
Mm. Yeah, it's a really fascinating story, and their relationship is very like the way that you describe their meeting is very evocative and very touching. And there's a lot of joy in the story, and there's a lot of, troubles and tribulations too. Placing your parents' story in that like global context of, global wars, of political violence, do you think that there are lessons to be taken for our times?
I believe so. I think the lesson there is people can overcome difficult situations, right? That's sort of what uh, I learned putting this book together is that um, during war, your life changes. There's so much trauma. There's so much emotional trauma. There's a tendency for people to want to lose hope because they witness so much terror. People they know have died or have been taken away, and so. Um, but over the years, they somehow have survived. They somehow have overcome that difficulty, and so what I would say people can take away from this is hope. That there's always hope no matter how difficult your situation is, you should never give up hope because you can overcome, things can get better. Other people have overcome, including my parents, even if you're in the midst of war or a politically difficult situation. And that doesn't mean that it's easy to overcome it, but it just shows that you can overcome it if you keep believing and keep pushing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really shows the value of hope and resilience rather, and how it itself is a tool that will help you survive. If you can like maintain hope in yourself, that is a life instinct, I think a little bit. That's a really beautiful idea.
Exactly.
Yeah, about resilience. Because I think oftentimes people outside of psychiatry will talk about it as an abstract or a value or a virtue, but it is like a psychological and psychiatric concept too, right? So do you have ideas about what make people resilient, or what people do to maintain hope in situations like that?
And there are clearly many factors that can contribute to somebody being resilient. Obviously, your life experiences oftentimes dictate how you how you react to the world around you. A lot of that is shaped by the people that help raise you, right? You know, the way we parent our kids is very important in establishing resilience, right? If your child falls down or is in a difficult situation and you encourage them to, you can do it, don't give up, you can do it, you keep pushing yourself, right? In a gentle, positive way. Over time, that child will probably learn to act a certain way, right? So a lot of that comes with that, right? If growing up you experience a really traumatic or difficult situation, how you are able to cope with that, how the people around you help you cope with that, can shape your belief that you can overcome the next stress that comes your way, right? So a lot of it has to do with how you're raised, your life experiences. There obviously are genetic components. There are obviously psychiatric disorders that can shape that. So when you're very depressed, for example, it becomes harder to believe that you can overcome something. There's a tendency, with depression for you to give up hope, right? So there are other factors that play a role. Um, so it's a really complex process in that way.
Mm. Yeah, I think the book does justice to how complicated it is and how hard it is to maintain resilience and hope. And I think it's a really lovely tribute to your parents, and also a really lovely argument about, what keeps people hopeful through difficult things. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Absolutely.
Are you writing anything else? Are there any more books on your horizon?
Well, I just completed this one, so I may take a breather for
That's
for at least a few months. But of course, I did catch the bug, and I am sort of thinking about potential or other future opportunities, maybe something about my perspective or my life down the road. The other thing I was also thinking about is something within the mental health field, right? Some kind of book, either educating the public or some sort of personal story about overcoming some sort of mental health challenge. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking about.
Oh, it's very interesting. Yeah, is that I imagine a very big change of pace from the sort of writing that you do connected to your day job, as it were, because you author chapters and articles as well, right? That's a very different type of writing.
It's a lot different.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing this one with us. I think it has a lot to offer our patrons, and I think we'll really appreciate it. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, listeners, it's now your turn. Please check out As the Rivers Merge, a story of love, war, and perseverance across continents. It's a gorgeous story, and by the time that you hear this, it'll be out in the world. So please head to your favorite independent bookstore or library, wherever you like to go for books. All right, thank you. That's all for this episode. It is time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.